Welcome back to your newest obsession, the NeuroSpicy MomPod. I am your host, Austin Marie, and today's conversation is one that I have been waiting to have with a returning guest, Miss Olivia Couch. I am so excited to have her back. We are going to be diving into authoritarianism in education, what it looks like, how it impacts our kids' nervous systems, and honestly, how it shapes the kind of adults that we grow and become. And I'm just so excited to be joined by Olivia, the creator behind Punk Philosophers. She has a background in human and developmental teacher education with experience across public schools and Reggio Emilia-inspired environments. But what really stood out to me about her work is how deeply she questions the systems we've all been told are normal. Because as she shares in her work, a lot of what we accept in education may be rooted less in how children actually learn and more in inherited systems, outdated structures, and even generational trauma. And instead, she censors something radically simple but powerful: love and autonomy as core ingredients for how children learn best. She's now creating alternative learning spaces through Punk Philosophers that are rooted in play, creativity, and human development, challenging the idea that kids need to exist in rigid, authoritarian environments in order to learn. So today, we're going to explore what happens when education prioritizes control over curiosity, who does this impact the most, and what becomes possible when we start doing things differently. Olivia, I'm so excited to have you here. Hi, Olivia.
I'm so excited to be here. It's so great to get to talk to you again.
Yeah, once I thought I really wanted to explore this subject in more depth, I knew I was like, I have to have Olivia back on. She would be the best sounding board on this because that is how I came to know you, is through your social media content, and you were talking about this. So how did you come to become interested in really looking at authoritarianism in our public school education?
It is definitely a journey with a lot of parts to it. The thing that I was thinking about as you were sharing my little intro, thank you, that when I was teaching for the first time as a Reggio Emilia teacher, I was directing a Reggio Emilia preschool for about 5 years. It led up to COVID, and then we broke out into pods and disseminated the preschool at that time. But as we were doing that work, we were a very attractive preschool. What we offered to people was what the people thought that they wanted in a lot of ways. Like, there was a lot of demonstrable academic growth by being in that environment. There was like very close support being in that environment, and just this awesome respect for each individual kid that the parents treasured. We're like very glad to find. And so there were all of these things that we did. But what we also did is we applied kind of when we went into teaching to be a public school teacher in California, we had to like take certain oaths about what we promised we would practice as like what best practice is. And so that best practice was like, don't bring politics into what you're doing at all. And I totally see benefits to that, where like you're not shaping other people's impressions, because I like to affect as little as possible of like with my own input. And so it's been so interesting to me because I made a conscious decision that I was no longer going to be discreet about the practices that I was practicing and why, and like what not practicing them means for kids, and speaking very explicitly about this being politically tied is much harder to find. Well, we're not as popular. Like, it is not that where we've got a full list and we're trying to get more space. It's a totally different reality. And so I think there's a whole lot that I can see in what we're ready to like, what we want and what we want to embrace and what we want to accept and what we want for our kids, and what we as a society are ready to like consciously say. And when we choose these things, we're also choosing socialism. Like, when we choose these things, we're also choosing anti-authoritarianism or anti-fascism. And so I would really like us to be able to put those things together without being too scared and to say, like, what we actually do need is anti-fascist environments. And what we actually do need is to heal these conditionings that have us operating in ways that we're operating, and that's not totally out there and wacky, but really reasonable and logical, because everything that you treasure about what great teachers are bringing into the classroom, those are things that are like empowering the individuals so that they can work together and have success and collaborate and shine. And it's such an awesome thing to get to do all the time. I love it. And I just want to share it with more people. And I want more people to understand how human beings are just built to do this. And we can just like get all the shackles off.
Yes. I mean, gosh, okay, the interview's over. She nailed it like completely. So many different big points that you hit because it's true. I remember even butting up against like someone being like, you want your child to have an IEP. And for me, it's like, of course I want my kid to have an individualized education program. Like, doesn't everyone want to have their child to have their education tailored towards them, for them to be respected by their teachers, for them to have autonomy in their classroom? I think those are all things that we kind of assume happen within the education system. But if you are on the other side of that as a teacher, you are also having to implement strategies just to control the environment that are stripping your kids away from the part. And I think that because we give so much trust to our education system, it's hard to then have to face the fact that this system is inherently not good for us. It's actually creating the worst kind of humans, and that's it shows our
Yeah.
own conditioning that we had during school.
Yeah, there's so many ways. So you shared a study with me, and now I don't remember the name of it, but it was about authoritarian.
Yes,
Somehow
I
I'll
could
share.
never remember the name of the title ever. I'm so bad. Like, I'll consume, the way I consume
They're very
information is
long
so difficult
titles.
because I'll consume the information, right? And I won't be able to parrot the like minute details. So it makes me feel embarrassed. Like, I swear I know what I'm talking about, but I get the gist.
Yeah,
I get the idea.
yeah,
I wanted to share it with you because I think that it brings up misconceptions that we have in what authoritative regimes do with education, and thinking that like, oh, we can't be authoritative because we invest in public school. And I love that it confronted like that's
yes,
misconception. Actually, a lot of
yeah,
mass public education was structured from authoritarianism regimes, and then breaking down why would they do that, and then what does that actually look like. And once you break that down, it's really hard not to look at our education system and be like, "Oh no, what are we What are we
yeah.
doing?"
And that's the important thing to carry with you and to know is that like a nation that is good at propaganda is good at educating in such a way that it gives like a positive image. There is like a glitter on this presentation that makes something that is sinister. Like it feels like being a crazy person to say these things, but it is, and that's the reality that we are faced with. Live
We
in
like it's literally a peer reviewed journal.
yeah. But the training is so deep that this is like normal, guys. This is normal and it's fine. But what you were saying is so true. I can think of so many moments in the classroom as a teacher, as a student, where the time in the space was spent on a teacher exercising some kind of effort to regain control. And so part of the classes that I run at Punk Philosophers is that we run for 2.5 hours a week, 1 day a week for 8 weeks. And that amount of math or that amount of writing or that amount of theater or whatever the activity is more deeply saturated with learning than often going to school from 8 to 3 every day because of the circumstances that are not fair to the teacher, not fair to the parents, barely fair to the administrators. Like, no one in this environment is getting like that grade of something in the shakeout.
I think that's why it's so hard to also talk about and like confront, because when you're a teacher, it's deeply personal and you are doing everything that you can, especially if you're coming to your space with child development knowledge to try to pad the system with development appropriate strategies and to try to pad the system with teaching strategies that do open up critical thinking and that do try to make the learning a two-way flow rather than it being a one-directional way of flowing. I was teaching TK when we did the COVID shutdowns. We went straight to online, and then the next step was to bring back kids for 2 hours a day, split up my class. 2 hours came in the morning, and then I had an afternoon class. It was half the kids. They were there for 2 hours, and that was through TK through fourth grade. Every single grade, every single class saw the most growth that students have ever had.
First of all, so cool that the school district or the schools had the flexibility to say, what's a way we're going to compromise here for the safety of people, to choose a different route and experiment with that and see what it like, apply best practices that we can and do that for the community. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's a very cool thing. So that was an opportunity that happened during COVID. But then there was this other exposure during COVID, which was like, how quickly schools wanted to get kids back in the same spaces, even though it was understood to be dangerous to, such a portion of the
Yes.
population. And then
Yes.
now, like the rules for lice, for example, are that like you are now no longer allowed to send anybody home because it's like a violation of the parent's right to work and like earn to be able to just keep on having your child be at school with lice. I read a cool book called Preschool in Three Cultures. And the one about China was really interesting because it was at the time where like people were slated to have certain schedules and just everybody in the community had to have these schedules. And so there was this school for Chinese kids where they would come for 6 days and sleep there and be in class through the morning and then stay and then spend their weekend with their family. And it was just like a very logical response to, well, these are the needs of the community. The community has to work this amount. And so therefore, in order to serve the public well, we will have to serve the public by giving them this amount of education. And so I see that being like, we can see that thread where the industry is held over the good of the child's development or the like wellness of the family itself. And so like it's just a different agenda. It's an agenda toward having working people working, and that is the priority, which is a lot in the paper that you shared too.
Yeah, I thought that that was really interesting, that that is an actual strategy that they will use in this equation of how to keep people from coming together and revolting, how they actually keep us separated is because they can pacify us with some basic education so that we have this feeling that, like, oh, we can better our life. But really what it is, it's like we are actually giving you information that we need so that we can lift the population enough to support our government and our regime and have a population that can do the tasks and the jobs that we need, rather than it being from the basis of, yes, every human has the right to education. The fact that we pay schools by having how many heads in a classroom. And if a student is absent, then you're not getting money. Then how is that coming with like the good intention of like, we care about our students. Please stay home when you're sick. Like we're sacrificing the goodness of what education can be because it has become an industry of profit.
Yeah. The please stay home while you're sick is like, then the person might be an authority over their body and what they decide to do that day. And that is not the goal of this kind of schooling. Like, this kind of schooling is meant to result in respect for authority, in the ongoing practice through the rest of that person's life, that they'll prioritize respect for authority. And I think the very different type of educational environment that we're talking about having, which is better for everybody, is the respect for everybody.
Yes. Yes. How many teachers did you know that would not use the restroom when they needed to? The fact that we have trained ourselves to not even have the autonomy of choice to use the restroom when we need to, like, we have been domesticated.
Yeah. And like, even the thought of having to go to the bathroom and juggling all of that is so much tension in our bodies, like just so much discomfort. And
Mhm.
yeah,
And that was a big part of my having to step away from being a teacher while I was dealing with my, anxiety and having like an autistic burnout. It was a lot of the total panic attack I would get when I would have to call in sick. It really did just break my heart for the love of teaching because I was like, I love my classroom. I consider this my classroom family. I spend more time here than I do with my children, but what do I get back from it? I just get grief. When I need support, I have yet to find it. And I know all schools districts are different. I know they're all their own little ecosystem, but like you said, it's not about the support. Take care of yourself, be home when you're sick, take care of your child. It's about you need to show up when we need you to show up. And it's just it strips away like the magic that is supposed to be learning.
yes, yes. And that the principal or the coworker who upholds the strictness is doing a like intersocial policing. That is one of the results of training inside of a classroom. And that as the teacher tries to gain control of their class and they try this strategy, which is manipulation, or this strategy, which is bribery, or this strategy, which is like, let's rally against the kids who are messing it up for us, or like all of these very unhealthy things to try. The kids get these stories about themselves and each other, and they start to police each other. And teachers, I've been in that position before, like, yes, I'm so glad that finally they're influencing this kid, or like, or that something's working, you know? And then to reflect on it now with a full understanding of what authoritarianism has built us here is like, those were not good things to model and not good things to practice. And they did strip the child of paying attention to the learning because they had to pay attention to the bribery system, or they had to pay attention to the chart on the wall or whatever it might be. And so then the relationship between the child and what they think is learning is something totally different than what they have, which is a relationship between themselves and school, or themselves and like the authoritarian culture of the classroom. And so, yeah, there's all of this lost. Hey, we're humans, so we're learners and we're really good at it. And it's also fun. And let's operate that way with each other. And then there's so much freedom there.
Well, and something that just popped up for me when you were saying that is that when you are teaching in that way, using those types of strategies, which is necessary for crowd control, because especially when your classes are full, that's the strategies that you implement.
Yeah, for
Where
safety.
it kind of occurred to me that, yes, we are really hijacking our human basic instinct and need for how much we are social creatures because we're tapping into how much we are invested in other people because we're constantly co-regulating with the people around them. And then we're trying to put that into determining which behaviors are deemed socially appropriate or not. And so we're creating this normalization of hierarchy and how we socialize each other by like you have to behave this way to be like okay, and if you're not then you're wrong. And right there, if you are a
Mhm.
neurodivergent person, this is just your brain, you're just questioning out of pure curiosity, you're not trying to threaten the system, you're not trying to compete, but because we are hacking the socialization of our species into hierarchies of what behaviors we deem appropriate and not, it really does leave people who don't just naturally fall in line, who do not perceive those social cues, who instead
Mhm.
think really logically. It really does set up a different type of living experience, like from the get go.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is probably true for both of us, that when in our teaching practice, you can't call it working if not everybody in the room is having success. That we can't call it a functional thing if we have to, like, if we design numbers based off of third grade test scores. Like, we can't call that a working thing.
So I'm wondering if we can kind of dive into the topic of how can we remove, like you said, it makes people uncomfortable to admit that the way that we have set up school, it is inherently authoritative. It just is. Like that is just how our schools are and the system is set up. But that feels so yucky for people. How can we instead rip apart the, like, I'm not saying that you're an authoritarian who wants your kids to be in school, but how can we instead replace it with this is what this type of system does to your child's development, to make them understand the impact that it has, so then maybe they feel more internally motivated to change the system from within.
Yeah. I'm thinking about in the Reggio Emilia practice, which is a basically an early child care system that became pretty nationally provided, but had originally come from a community of people post World War II who got together and said, we need to put our children first. We need to center our children because we know that's what's going to prevent fascist harm like this. And so they put their children in the center, and then they built multiple kind of like preschools and then education systems around it where the teachers are just working together as collaborators with each other, where they're witnessing the kids play. And then they're bringing back with each other, hey, I noticed them doing this. They seem ready for this. And so together they're talking about how they're going to help kids get on to the next bit of their development. And they're just keeping up with whatever new human development research is being published. So they're actively being researchers inside of their classroom, working with the kids that they're working with because they're observing and tracking data, basically. But in the meantime, the kids are just engaging in play with each other. And inside of this play, they're coming up with ideas. So they notice that there are no labels on the bins. And so how do they know whose bin is whose? And that's when they realize, hey, letters and names are for labeling. And so now they understand that this serves a purpose. And now they're gung ho to be starting to write letters. And they're learning from each other. Somebody can draw a really good O and everybody crowds around. They're like, wow, that's an O. And so they decide this is kind of the model O. And now all of them are striving to eventually put their names on these bins. And so there's no need to sit them down and have them stay seated and have them operate on a piece of paper right in front of them, all of which is very not conducive to what a child's body needs at the time. And they don't need to dedicate hours to sitting down again and again to take back out a math worksheet that's about the same topic. Because if they're learning it in the play with their friends, they care. And that's pretty much what you need to have it become a lasting piece of knowledge that is owned by the child. And the cost I see is that the alternative in the Reggio Emilia book, it talks about the alternative is when the adults decide in advance what every benchmark is going to be, what every goal is going to look like. And so when all of those things come top down, the creativity is like just hampered out, even though it's so valuable for us to develop. When we have those top-down environments, the experience is so flat. So it doesn't have long-lasting, it can't really become an owned understanding by the child because they memorized it because they had to for the test later. And so those are really shallow ways of learning that don't stick around. And so ultimately, the thing that is sticking around is we're supposed to be quiet now and listen to the person in the front of the room. Or, hey, that person is shouting and that's really the wrong thing to do. And I'm not going to do that like that person. And so those are the lessons that stick around. They get repeated plenty. And that's how we adults are operating as we are.
And the way that we are then showing them like what education is that I'm going to give you a question and I'm looking for one specific answer. Instead of it being like, let's have a discussion. Let's talk. You're like with the Reggio Emilia, like the way that you guys are introducing labels on cubbies, you're giving context to those labels rather than in my classroom. classroom. That was done by the teacher. So it was just, that's what it is. Like there was no context as like, this is the why behind why we're going to be teaching your name. But we had to get them to these points so quickly that we remove all of the context of all of the learning. And instead it's just like, eat this learning, eat this education. I need you to answer all the questions correctly. And we know that that is not producing humans that can take information, mentally chew on it, come up with their own opinion about it, speak on that opinion, and then adjust that opinion based off of other information that they have.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that metaphor of eat this learning, that is so real. Wow. Yeah.
Maybe because I'm
Wow.
hungry. So
Yeah.
can you explain the difference between how
Mm.
you would see those two systems affecting kids emotionally, not just behaviorally, but did you see a difference between their emotional development and how they express themselves?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, I gotta say, I'm seeing some like really cool Gen A ability to communicate. Like my kiddo who's 11 and his other friends who are 11 and 12, like listen to each other and are sensitive to each other. They know how to respond when somebody is like, "Oh man, I just got a really big scratch on my back or something." They're like, "Oh man, are you okay? Do you want to go to your house for a little bit?" And they like know how to tune into each other for a moment. It's just so sweet and cool. For us in my home, learning that having a big bad feeling is not being bad has been an enormously important, different lesson than the lesson that I took away from my pretty restrictive schooling environment, which was Catholic school. But the lesson of like, there's no space at all for you to have a bad feeling. There's no space at all for you to be sad, super mad. You can't express it. And instead, you actually have to do this worksheet or get that homework assignment done. And yeah, even I can like feel how like condensed I feel in my chest right now of like the pressure of yeah, taking home those lessons. So I think there's so much the fragility, white fragility. Like perhaps there's something there in our fragility of like being ready to be told that we're wrong or being graded by somebody. Because even being a small child and having the people that you're supposed to trust talking about how they score you is like a very troubling thing to put on a child.
Something that came up for me when you were saying how rigid those environments were, it kind of also, like you had to perform in a certain way. For example, like when it came to learning, I also went to a Catholic school, so it was very rigid. There were no questioning why we do things. There was no exploration about doing things in a different way. So, for example, when it came to like learning multiplication, the fact that I was struggling with it, they didn't think to explore what's happening neurologically, like maybe girl has dyscalculia. Instead, it was, you are not putting in
Maybe
the
there's a
effort.
different
You need to
way.
try harder.
Yeah.
And this is a you problem. When you're working in really tight, closed environments of what is allowed, what is considered good, you're stripping away possibilities of like, maybe this child is neurodivergent. I don't know. Like it just takes away all of the other
Yeah.
things that it can be. And it puts it right on the kid, right on the child. Like, no, this
Or
is a
they've been through
you
something
thing.
really difficult. Yeah.
Mhm.
And then when an authoritarian system is using these school systems, presenting them as good, I got started teaching during No Child Left Behind, and that was a time where they were saying that if you get a good test score, then you get rewarded with more money for your school. When, depending on what community you're working in, getting good test scores wasn't possible because test scores are reflections of the circumstances of the people who take the test. And so if you're reflecting the circumstances of people who experience trauma each night or are going through like extreme poverty or struggle in other ways, like you will have poor test scores and then you will have less money. And somehow the system didn't go like, hey, everybody, that's illogical. The system just said like, no, 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 school's good. No, 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 roads are good. No, 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 this is motivating. It's a you problem. They just need to get it together. We all know this. The principal knows it. The kids who grow up through these schools know it. Like all these things are you problems.
It really does hammer home the individualism within our society. And it also really does highlight look at who is centered in our society. Even the questions that are being asked on these standardized tests, you are assuming that every single child is coming to you with the exact same prior knowledge. You are assuming that they all have this background knowledge because of your specific upbringing. The fact that you're not really considering different cultures and you're just not considering other people's experiences. And if they don't have your exact experience, then they're going to get that question wrong. And it means that you're a dum-dum. It just doesn't make any sense. You're not actually testing anything that you want to know.
The only way that it makes sense is when you are operating at this one-dimensional version of things. And so within this one-dimensional version, you can believe oh, somebody said schooling was good for us, and so therefore schooling is good for us, and there's no question about it. And somebody said that a test score represents how smart a person is, so there's no question about it. And if we didn't get to dig dimensionally when we were young, we didn't learn how to dig dimensionally when we're adults, and then we can let all these things pass on through. We can be deceived by propaganda or by somebody who wants to use us.
And we're constantly seeking that reward, that yes, that pat on the back, I was acknowledged, I tattled, and I got a kudos from my boss, and it really does just get us to only cherry pick for certain types of intelligence. Just because you're really good at remembering and regurgitating in facts that you have just learned, it doesn't mean that you have all different types of intelligence. We are only rewarding a very specific type of knowing. Why don't we look into other types of modality, like people who are really good with their bodies? Look at the skaters and people who are doing flips off their bikes. That is also a type of intelligence that I know I don't have, but we don't value it. Or people who can just hear music and play it. That is an insane type of intelligence, but we don't value it. We're only picking and we're only valuing this one type of trait in school. And is that benefiting us as a society? I don't think so.
Yeah, because if we go down that road, because if schools like this are really developed by authoritarian systems intentionally for the use of the people as in the future. If it is the case that these things are designed as such, then a thing differently designed, like the way that we have been in teaching, making more space. Yeah, you can sit on a ball and bounce if you want to do your work that way. If that works for you, power to you. We've been finding ways to make the classrooms less fascist. And if we made space for all those intelligences, if we listened to the wisdom of, the other people's version of a story, then how much power would they still have over us? How much would they keep on getting to use us? How much money would they keep on getting to extract from us? How many of our children would they keep on getting to employ as well and extract from also? That's our job, is making sure that we go down that stretch knowing that there's this force that's been working against us for longer than we've been alive, and that's that this government wants to use people by not educating us and empowering us well.
When we have those type of fascist strategies that are used in classrooms that really strip kids from their own autonomy and having that figure running their day most of the day, I think that what it really also strips us from is basic human respect for each other. What becomes more important is I need to make sure that I am doing my best so I don't get in trouble and I get those good grades, rather than us being a collective we. And I think if we had education spaces where children were taught hey, if that child is struggling with the learning, it's not that child's fault. It's that we need to find a way to bridge that link to their ability, to their education. Then you are modeling to children that each person's need is important, that every human being deserves respect for being a human being alone. And then all of a sudden you're having this huge group, this generation of people who respect human beings just because they're human beings. Now,
Yeah.
I want to kind of talk about the other side of that, which is really focusing on how love and autonomy as an essential for learning. So, can you kind of explain? I know you explained a little bit how children lead the learning in those Reggio Emilia classrooms, but how would you see that apply in practice beyond preschool?
So I'm thinking about how the love as a principle, which to me is like meeting with patience, meeting with generosity, and then like just genuinely feeling enormous, like that love and patience and generosity enormously, and like just firing it at the kiddo, like right when you're in the moment where many times you would have like, done something different. And I say that love has continued to be the answer whenever there's like behavioral management stuff or like control issues, things like that. And I think it's often because that's the needed thing because there's something fragile happening. Like some part of the experience is uncomfortable or sensitive or just that things are not going okay for that kid right now, or they just aren't finding a way to have success. And so usually, like Ross Green is so great. I really like him. He has two books. One is The Explosive Child and one is Lost at School. And he talks about collaborative solutions. And one of the things the principle that he is like his starting principle is that every child is doing as well as they can do. And then from there, you can understand that any place that they're not doing as well as you would like them to, it's a lagging skill issue, not a will or being bad, which is not really a thing. And so I think love is basically saying, hey, this is a moment where you have to pause and figure something out where you're centering this kid's success and you are willing good things for them. And with that will for good things for them, you're going to be approaching it differently than otherwise. And so I think that's why love is such a powerful practice. And then autonomy, I think, is also a nervous system thing where it's kind of acknowledging that you said earlier that there's more brains in the room or something like that, that like in an authoritarian environment, there's like one brain in the room, they have the right answers, and everybody else is just like a peon who's like trying to glean some of that knowledge. And eventually, maybe one day, can also be a brain. But in the autonomy environment, it's like the full acknowledgement that everybody is like a brain and an awesome being with their own unique stuff. And then with that, like when you give respect, like you see a benefit from it. And when you give the like, hey, I have this faith in you. I'm going to let you work on this outside the classroom, but I have faith in you that it's going to actually help you focus. And so that sounds like a good idea. I'm going to check in and you can tell me if it's been working and if you have a different plan. And so the autonomy piece, yeah, kids just kind of step into the noble position that you give them. And it's not a lie, like it's them also. So like we could say that the position they're in is like they're being the bad kid, but I don't really think that's what's going on. I think like, hey, you have a noble opportunity at this moment. But the really important thing that Reggio Emilia does is making learning visible. And that is where you revisit things with you're retelling stories together. This is an act of love that's a part of human community for a really long time is looking back at things together and being like, how was that? And are you okay now? And acknowledging those learned things like, I remember how you were really struggling with this. Then you figured out that by laying on your tummy, you actually read the most pages you've ever read before. And now look at what a reader you are. So always coming back to those moments so that when they're moving forward, when they're an adult in the world, they know I face a problem. I have the ability to figure it out and get through it because I've looked back at myself doing that 100 times before because my teacher helped me. So those are the beautiful things that
Yes,
I
I
like
love
to
that.
integrate into all of it.
So let's pretend I'm handing you this magic wand, and now you are in charge of creating this type of education system for our nation. What do you think that
Ooh,
we need to be able to treat students in that way? Like, obviously my answer would be like money. We need so
Yeah.
much money. But really, what do you
Yeah.
think, like, if you could flick your wrist and bippity boppity boo, our education, what is a significant change that we could take to shift the learning into that love and autonomy focused attitude?
I think, okay, I'll say three things. One is like human development. It is a very silly thing that we human beings are not taught the way that human brains work, the way that human bodies work, the way that humans develop over time. And like, that's a very empowering thing. So, families, teachers,
Yes.
and everybody else should get to have a full education of like, well, this is what we do and when we do it and what we can rely on. Another thing would be just like so much play, pretty much outside nature playing, and that be a wide majority of the time that is spent schooling. And then I think like the specific education would look like when you walk into that classroom, that's where you do math things, and there are a couple of math people, and that's where you focus on that. But in the play, math comes up. So like you don't really need hours dedicated to the thing. You just need more exciting opportunities here and there. Reggio Emilia does invitations, which I really like. So in that way, the learning is play, and playtime can be so long because if kids not it's not like teacher comes out and says, okay, there are these two teams and you're on this team and you're on that team, and when I blow this whistle this means this, and when this happens this is going to happen. But that the kids go out there and they say, hey all, we're going to do this, and then somebody says, no, that's not fair, and then somebody else goes, okay, well, like, what should we do then? And then they negotiate it themselves. That we really needed that. And I would give like so much healing conversation time with like really cozy rooms and really delicious things and really chill environments for parents to realize that like they never had to sit through what they sat through. They never had to try that hard or get that worried or see themselves in the way that they saw themselves. And like we just get really cozy and responsive to like what has happened so far that really needs empathy. And we reintroduce empathy into education.
Honestly, when I think about like that type of what would just feel like bringing humanity back in education, I really see school. I deconstruct it from it being like kids isolated in individual classrooms and really like broaden it to like an open community. Like this, wouldn't it be cool if we had this big open space where there's tons of adults there who maybe their passion is plants. And so if you are also passionate about plants, you're going to go over there and you're going to hang out in that section of the community, and you're going to get to learn anything and everything. And that teacher is passionate about sharing and passing down this education. And instead of having one person have to be able to teach every single subject and, like be able to make it, like you said, a shared invitation to what are you naturally inclined to do? Are you a kinesthetic learner? Do you like learning with your
Yeah.
hands? Do you like being outside with plants? Do you prefer being with animals? Are you a math person? Do you want to sit and calculate stuff and work on equations with people? Or are you a
Yeah.
poet? Do you love language? Wouldn't that be cool if that was our learning experience rather than it just be a sit down and try to, I hope you remember as much as you can. Good luck.
Yeah. Well, that was the other part of the article or the paper was talking about how each of those governments that had propaganda in their schooling, they all had some kind of politics or social studies or like specific curriculum that told a specific story in that specific field. So when we talk about the alternative being these invitations in these different areas, it's like we do get to learn from our environments, and we only get to learn from our environments. So if the environment is only this one story with one point of view about the like history of the country, then that's so very limiting versus this other experience, which is if we know that we learn from our environments, put things in our environments, and then we get to be exposed to them all. And that takes me to that rat study where the rats were like using whatever drug they were giving the rats when they were in like a very empty space. But then as soon as
Yes.
they put them in like an amusement park-esque maze space, like they weren't using that drug anymore. Like, I think that our human species right now in our lives, we really need that like medicine of being able to have things in our environment that stimulate us
Yes.
instead of trying to tell ourselves that our stimulation is a bad thing and we need to like keep on hampering it down.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've gotten so deconstructioned and like woo woo on it. I'm just like, get every kid in barefoot and put them on some grass. I really feel like it has been through the removal of our connection to nature that you said are how environments play this massive role on our neurological development. And yeah, that rat study is so interesting because here we are, we spend so much money on this war on drugs when we know for a fact that if you put mammals in living conditions that to what it naturally needs, if you
Yeah.
have all of their physical
Yeah.
needs met, they're not going to choose to medicate themselves. They
Yeah.
won't need to. So it's like, wait, maybe we won't have these drug problems if we're not putting each other under this like immense stress to have just our basic needs met
Yes.
and then go to a school system that is saying that if your needs aren't met, it's your problem because you're not doing it the right way. It just really does, I mean, cover up for the systemic problems that that we're living under.
Yeah. Very convenient. Yeah.
I could go on in this conversation forever. Thank you so much. I just love talking about the education system in these different frameworks because it needs to be deconstructed in some
Yeah.
way. And I really feel that like we are in this moment in time where the veil is being lifted and we're starting to see and question systems for what they are. And I think that now it's time for people like yourself to take the stage who have this idea for how it can be different. Like I think we know how it's wrong. We've figured it out. And I think we've really been like mulling over that. And now it's time to jump on that
Yeah.
fire horse and show, let's do it this way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that all of us get a chance to see it more and hear it more so that it starts sounding less like a woo-woo crazy idea and more like a, wait, this does make a lot more sense kind of an idea. Because, yeah, if we can be faced with COVID and then take a route that goes 2 hours, and makes the space so much better for the teachers and the kids, like we can certainly have the ability, we know we do, to get together and say, wait, these are our circumstances now. What knowledge do we have now that, when met with those circumstances, can turn into us serving our kids so much better? Yeah,
Yes. And
I hope we get
in
there.
return, our whole society gets to benefit from that because if our kids grow up to be these empathetic, critical thinkers, it's not like we're going to have a worse society than we have now. Like it's not going to hurt us.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just loving imagining that future, seeing a future run by kids like that.
Ugh, yes. I mean, I will delusionally hold out that hope. I really do. I look at my kids all the time. I'm like, well, it's you guys. Like,
Yeah,
like, they keep saying there's more
yeah,
neurodivergent kids than ever. And I love the idea that people are saying that, yes, Mother Nature is bringing more neurodivergence into this world because the earth needs to heal. And we need people who live in their sensitivity.
yeah, beautiful.
All right. Well, I want to say again, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to actually include that article that we read together in the show notes if anyone else is interested. It was just a really interesting little article that I think was pertinent to this conversation. And I will make sure to include all your information in the show notes too. But would you like to shout out anything that you have coming up or your Instagram or anything like that so people can find you?
Sure. Yes, my website's punkphilosophers.com, and I have kids classes and little ones sing along classes, and they start again next week. So spring will be March 30th through May 24th. So I'm looking forward to that season starting up. And I also have adult classes that are online, so people who are not in the area can come to the adult classes, and that's been fun too. So
Yes, amazing. I'll make sure to put that again in the show notes so people can find you easily. And just course, again, thank you for spending some time with me and sharing your wisdom. I love picking your brain.
I love it. Thank you. It's so fun to get to talk, and anytime.
Yes, we'll be in touch soon, I'm sure.
Bye.